Well, we're back here and studying Philippians again, and we're in chapter 4, the final chapter. And it's been a few weeks since we last were here, but the world's changed a little bit while we've been missing doing this, hasn't it, Nigel?
I haven't noticed actually.
No?
No. People keep talking, wearing these things on their faces.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's all for, really.
Ah.
But yeah.
But we're coming to the last chapter in Ephesians 4, and it talks about exhortation, joy, rejoicing. I think this is pretty good little ending to this book for our day and age where we are now. And when we look at verses 2 to 7, what do you think of that then, Nigel? Those verses that are written there. Would you like to read those out? And
You want me to read from 1 to 7?
No, 2 to 7.
2 to 7?
Yeah.
I implore you, Eudia, and I implore Syntyche, if I've pronounced it right, to be of the same mind in the Lord. And I urge you also, true companion, help these women who laboured with me in the gospel, with Clement also, and the rest of my fellow workers, whose names are in the book of life. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again I will say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to all men. The Lord is at hand. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. Let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus.
Yeah, and there's a pretty famous verse there, which I think most Christians would straight away go to. But in everything, by prayer, petition and thanksgiving, present your request to God. I think most Christians know that one. But actually there's more in this section, isn't there, than just those verses?
Yeah, absolutely. As always, you have to look at the context. The immediate context and also the flow of the previous chapter to really understand, to get a proper and good interpretation of what the text is saying. As the saying goes, a text without a context is a con.
And I like this bit, women.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Yeah, women in church leadership, really, isn't it, in a sense, because they were looking after the church quite a bit as well, weren't they?
Yeah, and in other parts of the New Testament, there was clearly great freedom for women in ministry in the early church, in the primitive church, as it's called. You can see that in other passages, like Lydia, and there's several examples where women had great freedom in ministry, which really, that in itself is a big topic, But should we go through it sort of systematically, and good, if you want to look at verse 1 and.
Yeah. So when it opens up, it says, therefore, my brothers, which is quite interesting what we just said, you whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, that is how you should stand firm in the Lord, dear friends. This standing firm is quite an important piece, isn't it? Because
it is, absolutely. Look at 1 verse 27, you've got the same term there. That you stand fast in one spirit with one mind. It's the same topic, it's cropping up again. But stand fast is also, he uses it as a metaphor, it's a kind of a military term for warfare, like Ephesians 6. Stand fast in the evil day, to withstand the evil one.
Yeah.
So stand fast is very much related to warfare, of what's going on in a wider context. And we can see, and actually, the way I look at this, I think verse 2 is actually a really key verse, which I'll explain as we go through.
Yeah.
But his greeting speaks so deeply of Paul's heart, his pastoral heart, and the intimate relationship that he had with this church. I mean, think of the intro. My version, I've got New King James. Therefore, my beloved and longed for brethren, my joy and my crown. So stand fast in the Lord, beloved. So, I mean, think about that. That's like a parent to a child, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really emphatic. It's so deep and intimate. My joy and my crown. So that really speaks of the very close, intimate relationship that he has with this particular church.
Yeah. And also, it's sort of, if you look at it, it's not just about a group of people meeting and doing something together. This is relationship, isn't it? This is a deep relationship of love and care, and even though they're miles apart, there's a sense in the way it's worded that this is like family.
It is, very much so. I mean, bearing in mind the context of why there is even a book called Philippians. I mean, look at Acts 16 is the kind of context that Paul and Silas. Paul had delivered this slave girl from a demon of spirit of divination, and she would earn a lot of profit for her slave masters through fortune telling. That profit now was taken away. That's why they kicked off, and they were beaten and imprisoned. So they delivered this young slave girl from a demon, and they threatened the power of those people and the profit that they were making from this slave girl. That's the wider context. They were beaten and imprisoned, and as we know in Philippi, they were imprisoned, beaten and imprisoned, but then they rejoiced at midnight. They were singing hymns.
Yeah.
And God brought an earthquake. The jailer was saved. His whole family was saved. That's the wider context. That's the normal Christian life for Paul.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That's the context.
Yeah.
That's why there's a letter to Philippi.
No, and it's not just about association, is it? It's about belonging, being part of the same body.
Yeah. So, so stand fast in the Lord.
Yeah.
Now, in verse 2, why do they need to stand fast in the Lord? Well, verse 2, I think is quite key, because there's this unity between these two women. We don't know why. I implore you, Euodia, and I implore Syntyche to be of the same mind in the Lord. So there's something going on.
Yeah.
There's an issue, there's a dispute, and there's this unity. And actually, the imperatives that we see in the passage that we're looking at are relevant to that disunity.
Yeah.
In other words, this is how to deal with disunity. Because there's disunity, and he urges them, then he goes on, he gives them imperatives. This is how to deal with disunity, as we will see.
And we probably need to learn in our modern day from this, really, don't we? Because many people think, because you have different views on things, that is against what the other one believes. But actually, it's not that, is it? Is you can have views and opinions, but and I think what Paul's trying to say here is, but keep in focus what is the truth about our relationships, our fellowship with Christ, and being in Christ. All that is that's the important piece. We might look at things differently, but the important thing is keep focused on the thing that is important. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and although we are just looking at 1 to 7, but in the next two verses, which are also very important, finally, brethren, whatever things are true. Yeah. And he says, think on these things to deal with unity. Yeah. And the first things he mentions is true. Whatever things are true.
True. Yeah.
And they're all Christ-like characteristics, actually, when you unpack them. So those are the things, as well as the previous 3 to 7, what he says, the imperatives there, is addressed to the disunity.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, that quite important, because we can learn how to deal with disunity.
Yeah.
So.
And I think when you look on then, so you go there, yeah, it's got this piece about whose names are in the book of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like this is a fact, isn't it? This is a certainty.
Yeah.
And I think that's lovely when you see it there, isn't it? That he's dealing with this issue about focusing on the right things, and then he says this, doesn't he? He says this piece about whose names are in the book of life.
Yeah.
So, what's your thoughts about that then?
Well, again, if you we're looking at verse 3, yeah.
Yeah.
So if we look at some of his language, the terms that he's using, I urge you, my true companion, help these women, again there's women, who laboured with me in the gospel. So the word laboured with me, the implications of they have worked hard and they have grafted. It's like a military term.
Yeah.
Because stand fast is a metaphor for warfare. These women laboured with me in the gospel. And you only have to look at Paul's sufferings in 2 Corinthians 11 and other passages. That he laboured, he just didn't stop. He just did not stop until they cut his head off.
Yeah.
These women laboured with him.
Yeah.
And that speaks volumes about these women.
Yeah.
So they laboured with me. Help these women who laboured with me in the gospel. With Clement also, we don't know who Clement is, and the rest of my fellow workers whose names are in the book of life. So it's like an amazing reassurance that these women who laboured with me and this individual, so he refers to a specific individual and the rest of my fellow workers. He doesn't have to say whose names are in the book of life, but he does. And our names, by faith, are written in the book of life. And as you said, Kev, we have to keep the right perspective.
Yeah.
We have to keep our eyes on eternity. And when you, just to think, my name is written in the Lamb's book of life, it's like, whoa, how comforting is that? How that puts courage into your soul. Yeah. And it gives you the right perspective of what we are meant to be living for, what we are investing in, what we do with our time, our talent, our treasure, as they say, our finances, our time, our energy, our gifts. We're stewards of everything we have to invest in eternity. That's the perspective we are to have.
Yeah.
Because our names, we can't just sit back and think, oh, my name's written in the book of life, we can just take it easy. No,
I think
it's the complete opposite.
Yeah, I think there's like knowing that, and what I find is that brings in myself, it brings this feeling of, because I know that, I want to honour that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I want to walk into that.
Yes. So
that it is something that motivates me to surrender all, to knowing that that's a security I have.
Yeah.
And I think that's what motivates. And that's what makes your Christian life different to to what you see as what people call normal life now.
Yeah.
It's like, actually, no, there's more than this.
Yeah.
And as you said, like the eternity, thinking on eternal things is always going to bring about a different lifestyle than thinking on the worldly things. And I think that's really important, because actually the motivational triggers are different.
Well, I when you compare modern, contemporary Christian life or Christianity today in the 21st century with the New Testament, I mean, you can't even mention them in the same breath almost. It's like a different thing altogether. It's a completely different entity.
Yeah.
And there's huge implications for that. because it can change your perspective. It can affect your perspective if you just live for comfort and you're just too comfortable. And you are anaesthetised by too much comfort. And, you know, if that's got its hold on you and its hooks in you, which it can, then your perspective is on the things of this life. That's very dangerous.
Yeah.
Very dangerous. Because in times of testing, and they will come, if you haven't been tested previously, and your faith hasn't been matured and purified in the fire as gold, as it says, then you may not stand up. You know, there's going to be a great falling away, you know, depending on how you look at that. So, very big implications for having an eternal perspective, or not, as the case may be.
But then it comes to this piece, and I love this because he mentions it twice, is rejoice in the Lord always.
Yeah.
And I will say it again, rejoice.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what you're talking about, that perspective of keeping that in mind.
Yeah.
Beyond any of the struggles we see of the world.
Yeah.
That we should be rejoicing.
Yeah. And so to these two women who have disunity, what is Paul's counsel? Rejoice. What in? In your possessions? You got a job? You got an income? You got a good family support network? You've got a good church, you know, whatever. No. You rejoice in the Lord. You might not have anything, but you rejoice in the Lord.
Yeah.
Now Paul, as it goes on to say, he knew how to be without anything. He learned how to be content without anything and with much. So he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So he's advising them, counselling them.
Yeah, and we see that if you look across the world at the poorest areas of the world sometimes.
Yeah.
And you know, those that believe, you see a joy on their faces.
Well, I've seen it. I mean, because as you know, we've been involved in missions quite a bit over the last 10 years in Nepal, and believe me, you know, it's like there are areas of Nepal where it's like the medieval times. It's really quite shocking, the level of poverty and what they don't have, and the you know, you talk about basics. I mean, yeah, it's really quite shocking.
Yeah.
But they have Christ.
Yeah.
And it is so humbling because some of those people are my friends. You know, I've been there 4 times. I live there. We live there. And you get to know them and you see how they live. And yet they love Jesus because he's all they've got.
Yeah.
And when you see that up close and personal and you live with people like that and you work with people like that, it does something. It really does something. It's not easy coming back to the West, to say the least, to put it mildly. It really isn't.
I mean, we rejoice. You know, when you come back, you think, well, I rejoice over the water. It's going to turn the tap on.
Well, I do.
They've not even got that.
Well, I do, because you know we were there best part of a year, and you know you have 16 hours a day without any electricity. But you just get on with it.
Yeah.
And you know, we had to have a bucket of water. We washed in a bucket of water. There's no water sometimes to do the washing up, but you just adapt.
Yeah.
You know, you adapt because you have to.
Yeah.
And it's humbling and it's good actually, because it does things in you. Yeah.
And I think that's good. This is a good point to keep in mind, isn't it?
So anyway,
rejoice in the Lord always, and I say again, rejoice. What a thing to keep in our minds.
Well, the fact that it's an imperative, you see. So we look at these imperatives. It's a double imperative. Again, I will say rejoice.
Yeah.
But again, it's related to the disunity in verse 2.
Yeah.
He's counselling them all virtually. Look, do this. Rejoice in the Lord. Humble yourselves. Then he talks about gentleness in the next verse. Rejoice in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Keep your eyes on the Lord. That's where your strength and your sufficiency comes from. You know, he's given them a perspective that is going to deal with the disunity. Because if there's disunity, it's all going to be about self. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
It's not going to be about the fruit of the Spirit.
No.
Because the fruit of the Spirit will not, it's not going to create disunity, is it? So it will come out of self.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. Yeah.
And as you say, like, let your gentleness be evident to all.
Yeah.
And the Lord is near. I love gentleness. I think it's one of my favourite things, because I think hopefully I've always exampled this. Maybe sometimes I don't, but sometimes it's been. I always feel that everybody needs the opportunity to feel that, and to be encouraged by that, and everybody should be approached with a gentle approach to that. So an example is when somebody's been sort of really lonely or whatever, that actually it's our gentleness that actually breaks through into that area. And when people are stuck and thinking, can I do this or whatever, actually this is a fantastic. I mean, I found it. Obviously, you know this ministry quite well, and we find that actually that is the best way to approach people.